Hello, this is Andy Burns, and in this episode of the Project Management Podcast, we're going on a diet to lean out an overweight PMO.
Hello and welcome to the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com. I'm Cornelius Fichtner. We are coming to you live from the encouraging 2018 PMI Global Conference in Los Angeles. And with me right now is Andy Burns. Hello, Andy.
Hello, Cornelius, and thank you so much for doing this. It's a great service you do for project managers.
Well, thank you for sitting here with me 2 years in a row. We did one last year, right?
I think so.
Okay. So my question has to be for what are you going to present next year? Because we need to do an interview on that.
I'm doing more and more with portfolios in Lean and Agile, so it will probably be there.
Yeah, all right. So your presentation is titled Calorie Counting and the Lean-Agile PMO. Let me begin with somewhat of a challenging question. Lean-Agile PMO. Those two things, Lean-Agile and PMO, they don't seem to go together all too well in my head. Lean and Agile, that talks to quick and fast and Lean and Agile, right? Whereas PMO, it's like, okay, we are prescriptive, we have this methodology, you have to fill in these templates. It takes forever. Here's a new rule. And if you don't do it our way, we'll send an auditor. How do these two things mix together?
Well, it's very interesting because we found out that Agile itself doesn't scale very well from small teams. And we've also found that PMOs, with their prescriptive nature, are not very good at managing the flow of value through a business. And so there's a school of thought and a group of people that's come together and said, let's lean out the PMO. Let's take some of this heavyweight prescriptive documentation and process, and let's look at flow, and let's focus on getting business value to come out continuously. So we see an opportunity to have value come out immediately and compound, like compounding interest in a bank account. And we're incredibly encouraged by what we're seeing. Myself and several colleagues that are doing this at different companies. And so it is possible to take the traditional PMO and say, look at your practices and see if you can lean them out. So I do have a bit of a recipe I'm going to share at the Congress on Monday, and I'm incredibly excited to do that.
Right. And what are the qualities of a Lean Agile PMO when you compare it to, say, a traditional PMO?
Well, it really comes down to the definition of your work. If you think about our definition of a project, our traditional definition of a project, it's a one-time endeavor to create a new service or a new product. And if you think about that, how can I possibly optimize something that's unique and being built one time? So the Lean PMO says you need to pay a little bit more attention to the components of the project and break it down and drive some of that variability out of the process so that you can basically optimize the entire value chain from the moment the project or the program becomes a gleam in someone's eye down to the person that's actually delivering the unique product or service. So in this context, we're saying projects are too big and too amorphous. We really need to focus on what are the individual components. And this can be done at the portfolio level. And Lean is informing us in different ways of doing this. So I'm really excited to share these Monday.
You said you and your colleagues have done this in several places. Mm-hmm. Have you succeeded everywhere, or have you found that, it works better in this industry versus that industry?
Well, what we've found is that agility is not a destination. It's a continuous journey. And naturally, things will go backwards from time to time, and they'll go forward. And so everybody has periods of retrenchment and periods of doing better. But if you think about it, the traditional project, say it's going to deliver $1 million in 10 months. So in 10 months, you'll get that $1 million worth of value. If you think about a lean project run through a lean PMO, it's going to give you $100,000 a month for the next 10 months. So basic financial costing will show you that you'll begin to get interest on that first $100,000, on that second $100,000, and every month you'll have more and more money compounding. And so there's really no competition. Once these processes and thought processes take hold within a portfolio, you can't compete. I mean, it really does win.
This is exactly where I was going to go next. Thought processes. Because What change in the mindset of people, project managers, PMO managers, management in general, has to take place before you can convert or even implement a lean agile PMO?
Well, in my experience, we always talk about culture. How will we change the culture? And my experience has been that culture changes last. You need to bring processes online and show people the success, and then prepare to refactor those processes and make them better and better as you go along. So your first steps, really depend on having a recipe in place. And in my presentation, I'll talk about this recipe, which basically has 6 steps. But, from a portfolio organization level, there are a few things you can do to build what we call social capital. And social capital is basically saying people begin to trust you when they see incremental improvements, and then the culture will change. You can't go in and say, change the culture. There's no magic wand to wave, no fairy dust, nothing you can do. However, if you go in and you make small incremental improvements, the culture does begin to move.
The recipe that you have just mentioned is actually 7 steps long, and they jumped right into the last one, the social capital. So if I understand this correctly, this is what you get at the end of the first 6 steps once you've gone through them. You've shown that it works, therefore you get the social capital, and now let's really do this.
Each of the steps builds up more and more of this social capital.
Okay.
And people are fundamentally not motivated by money, and we all think they are. People are actually not motivated by prestige and power, though we think they are. They're motivated by success. Little successes early on will move a company light years ahead. And so this recipe, and we've road tested this, and I'm doing it right now at my current employer. You go in and you get little wins in areas that you can focus on, and traditionally organizations have been strong in these areas anyway. And you don't necessarily go in and tear out their processes by the roots, because the processes that people have created are there for a reason, and generally they're good. But there are some overarching mathematical rationales that you can put on top of existing processes to make them more efficient, to improve flow, and to deliver business value better. And the science is there. Extrapolating the science and articulating it is something that people are learning to do right now. And it's really quite incredible. And once it gets started, it's a waterfall. You can't compete. It's a tidal wave that comes in. It just takes time, and it takes some patience. And, as I said earlier, you will go backwards, and that's okay. But you'll eventually pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and say, all right, I've reverted to my old behaviors. I've been incredibly prescriptive. I need to think about what I should be doing and start to, again, deliver that incremental value. And there, the first area that I always talk about is quality. And quality is something we've been doing forever, but there are new techniques and new technologies available. And by deploying these techniques and technologies, we can free up some of the people that are doing these repetitive quality tasks, let the automation do that, and use these people to critique the product and to help the customer better define the product as opposed to running repetitive tests. And so this first little step is part of that tidal wave. The tsunami begins, and it's really, really quite incredible. And we're seeing it in company after company after company. And quality, generally in an organization, there's a strong sense of ownership. There's one group to work with. There aren't too many interlocking departmental lines of command. So generally within one quality group, if you embrace some of the Lean Agile concepts, you can begin to build this, core of energy that really builds up that social capital. And then you can start to move on to some of the flow concepts, some of the delivering business value faster. And then it's turned out that it's really incredibly easy to increase flow. It just takes that, leap of faith, and people won't take the leap of faith until they've seen some results. So this recipe will inform us, improve your quality, use some of these modern techniques, free up these quality people who are so process-driven and understand your business so well, and put them in a position where they're critiquing the business and they're improving the business as opposed to running repetitive tests. And then once you've gotten that social capital, now start to talk to people about flow of business value. And that once you get to that second step, oh, you're off to the races. It's really quite incredible. It is really quite incredible.
All right, those were the first 2 steps of your recipe: focus on quality and reduce the work in progress, the flow. Next, you have deliver often. That seems to be taken straight out of the Agile Manifesto.
It really is, and it's something that occasionally customers aren't prepared for because they've got decades and decades of conditioning that it takes 18 months to get a project. Because we always start our projects with, well, the portfolio gets put together in July. So around May, we start to tell our stories and write up our business cases. And then everybody gets together and they fight until July, and then the portfolio is declared, right? And at that point, requirements are signed off. The Great Council gets together, they bang the drum, and everyone says, we're ready. This is the plan. And then everyone goes away. And basically what we've done is we've backed up the dump truck and we've dumped everything onto the producers. And we've not prioritized anything. And we've also said the market may change, the priorities may necessarily shift, but we're not going to pay attention to that as portfolio managers. We've got our annual plan. Our hands are off it now. We'll let it fly. So delivering often really gets down to saying we're going to deliver periodically so that we can adapt to changes in the marketplace. We're going to pay attention to our customer, but also pay attention to our portfolio. And this is the lean part. We need to be very efficient about this, hyper efficient. And right now, our typical PMO process is 3 months of fighting and scheming to create an annual portfolio that basically maximizes the utilization of all resources on the day it's released and creates a tremendous amount of conflict and multitasking and slows everything down, and it takes your throughput and just extends your cycle times to their maximum. So if you think about it, if you really focused in on priority, you could go ahead and deliver something immediately that the customer loved. The customer would give you money for that. You could begin to immediately start to compound interest on this revenue you brought in. And so all good things flow from delivering frequently.
You've already talked about this next step a little bit, balancing demand against throughput.
Yeah, and the metaphor that I use in the presentation is there's a revolving door, and there's somebody standing at the revolving door, barring your way, and she wants you to fill out a form before you go through the revolving door, saying, these are all the offices and spaces I'm going to visit in this building before you can go through the revolving door. And you may not even know where you're going in that building, but you have to stop. And so balancing that demand and throughput is key. And, to go back to the metaphor of the annual plan, we dump all the work on everybody all at once. And for decades, we've all been conditioned to look at utilization and to say, my job is to keep everybody 100% utilized. So I get my magnificent spreadsheet with all the names and all the projects, and I assign everybody to projects 20% here, 50% there, and I get everybody fully utilized. And that project is perfect and brilliant, and that plan is remarkable for 1 second until I hit save, because at the next moment, what are the chances something will go wrong? Those chances are 100%. The entire plan will fall apart because of all the cascading dependencies we've created. So it's super, super important to manage demand and to say, let's not take in everything. Let's be skeptical.
Mm-hmm. Then we move on to prioritizing. What do we prioritize? The tasks within the projects, or the projects themselves, or the portfolio overall, or everything?
Well, we have a long, long history of prioritization, and this is nothing new. And in fact, my advice to consultants that are approaching a PMO is to be very careful here, because prioritization's gotten itself kind of a bad name. But here's the fact. If I have 2 projects for you that will both bring you in $10 million in revenue, but one project takes a month to do and the other one takes 6 months, which one would you do first? Obviously, you'd do the one that only took a month. And this economic balancing is something that's been missing from our prioritization. So we've never really spent enough time to look at the cost, the opportunity cost, and to deliver the most important thing first. And our priority really depends on our ability to schedule the work. We might have something that's a high priority, priority A, but we can't figure out how to break it down into a manageable size piece of work. What do you do with that? Well, the traditional solution has been to jam it in the pipes anyway and let it thrash around. And what we've really learned about priority is to say, it might be better if we took a hard, cold look at this and said, can we figure out how to estimate this thing? And if we can't, we need to do some more research. And even though it's a higher priority A, B, or C, it might not be ready to be scheduled. And that's where you get into this concept of scheduling based on economic value and establishing flow based on economic value. So you look at the cost of delay, cost of waiting, how much revenue will you lose, what new knowledge won't you gain, and you also look at the size of the job, and you do those small jobs first, bring that money in. So this is really new. I think the management science is well proven out, and it's really remarkable. Once you put this in, we'll go back to our social capital. People start to see things emerging immediately from the portfolio. They start to make money right away. People get very excited by this. And you often hear things like Agile is faster. I totally stand in opposition to that comment. I don't think it's faster. I just think it delivers the highest economic value that it can more quickly. And so we all perceive that this is faster because value is materialized. Agile's harder, but it can deliver value much quicker.
And then the sixth step is attack variability and improve predictability.
And we talked a little bit about this earlier when we talked about the project.
Yeah.
And that's always been our fundamental unit of measure, right? The project. So again, think about a project. It's a one-time service or product that we're creating. So it's a unique thing, never existed before. How in the world can we optimize something like that? They're variable by their very nature. So what we really need to do in the portfolio is stop this small project, medium project type thinking and really standardize on units of work. So our guide for WBS management, our WBS practice guide, there's a lot of insight in there into how to break work into manageable size pieces that you can extract value from. And of course, in the Agile community, they're calling these things epics and features and stories. Whatever the flavor of your company is, applying the basic math to variability will help you to determine where the economic value is. Because you want to take things and say, how big is it? How much money will it bring in? How much risk will it eliminate? How much new knowledge will we get? And relatively rank everything in your portfolio and then decide what to do. And this is really, really key to it. So it's a very empirically driven process, very stochastic. And it's just incredible to see it taking off like it is right now. And again, we started out talking about, the PMO being too prescriptive, too bound by process. And we talked about agility not scaling well. And between these is lean agility. It makes these two things connect. And it really, really works.
All right. Before we continue, just a quick note. We are coming live here from the conference, and I see that a lot of people are coming out of the doors. So maybe just between sessions, it might get a little bit louder here around us for the next few minutes. So these 6 steps: focus on quality, reduce work in progress, deliver often, balance demand against throughput, prioritize, and then attack variability and improve predictability, which all lead to improved social capital. That's the theory. Mm-hmm. Now the rubber meets the road or hits the road. Which of these is hardest in your experience to do?
They get harder progressively. And the reason that they're in order like this is because we attack the easiest thing first. So there's no great heroism here. Let's attack the biggest problem. But if you think about it, as you progress from quality to flow, you're moving from one group, usually a quality group that's fairly controlled by one person, and when you start to talk about flow, you're crossing departmental boundaries. Mm-hmm. And with each of these steps, you're getting broader and broader in the organization with the ultimate goal of optimizing the whole. And that's, from the boardroom, the portfolio, all the way down to the individual, delivering that task on the project. And so with each step, the transparency improves, the inspection opportunities increase, the adaptation begins to flow, but each one gets harder. And so the prescription that I'm offering is definitely something I've road tested, and you build up the social capital along the way. And that's really the key to it.
Before you can get started on this journey, you have to get buy-in from above. It's like, yes, we want to transform our PMO. But at that point, you don't have the social capital yet. The social capital will happen later on. So how do you convince management to see the light and say, oh, yeah, that it looks like a hard road to go on, but we need to go onto this?
Well, and, my current life is a good example. The original group I came in to manage was about 300 software engineers. And sometimes when your boss asks you for a pizza, just bring your boss a pizza, right? And they said, let's tune this group up. Let's make this group more efficient. But by doing that, and the first step, of course, with this group was to attack quality and to use these modern techniques to automate quality. By doing that, we went from an environment where we were, doing a typical regression test harness of about 5,000 test cases at the end of a release, which was, say, once every 6 months. We went from that 5,000 to 75,000 tests being run twice a day.
Twice a day?
Exactly. And the people that had been running the 5,000 turned out to be the geniuses in the company that understood the product backwards and forwards. And so to take them out of the role of only critiquing the product, but now critiquing the product and helping the business to align, we suddenly had this environment where massive testing was going on. It became part of the culture. And also the customers began to notice, we don't have any defects. There are no defects escaping. What's going on here? And so from that little group of 300, it has expanded to 1,200, and it's continuing to expand. And once you get that little bit of social capital, other people want to go along. So it's really, being able to look around, being patient. And I always say this to all project managers. Nothing happens very fast, but you should have a plan on making it happen. And so we've done that. And I think many, many companies have had this experience. This prescription that I offer Monday is not unique. Lots of people talk about it. And I think it's been well documented. So I think that it can be done. And it's just a matter of getting in. And the more and more of these 6 steps you get, the more social capital you get. And so the last slide in my presentation is of a hippo. And that's the social capital slide. And people ask, why do you have a hippo up there? And I say, well, because we're all conditioned to follow the highest paid person's opinion on how to do things. And really it comes down to developing enough social capital at each level in the company, from the junior person doing a task all the way up to the people that report to the CEO, letting each one of those groups have enough social capital so they're trusted. It's not just a matter of trusting the PMO. In fact, the PMO is the last group that needs to be trusted. It's each individual that's playing their role and following their steps in the process. And once you develop that social capital, there's your tidal wave. And your hippo will always be very happy when, they can trust everybody. Everybody gets to go home on time. Yeah. It's very nice.
So let me do something here. I'm taking my cell phone out of my pocket. I have your phone number on here. This is a magic cell phone. It dials through time.
Okay.
So if I now dial your number back to the beginning of your project, what would you tell yourself where the pitfalls are that are lying ahead of you and what you should be doing differently as you're now starting out on your Lean-Agile PMO journey?
Well, I have recently started to use one of the Agile frameworks for scaling. And I think that the model that I like is, I call it LHM. So people need to learn, so you need to teach them. And this is formal teaching. This is classroom teaching. When I started out, I didn't have formal curriculum set up. And then there's H, which is getting them to develop a habit, which is coaching. When I started my current project, I was all about coaching, forming that habit and then trying to establish this Lean Agile mindset. So I really missed that L piece. And I would encourage people, when you get into it, a little bit of formality and rigor is very helpful. People greatly appreciate a defined curriculum, little badges to earn along the way. I'm a Lean developer, I'm a Lean Scrum Master, I'm a Lean portfolio manager. And that helps you to, get that first step. Now, all training is frankly quite superficial, but it gives you that purchase so that you can take that next step into coaching. So, the LHM model, that H, really, you can get into it quicker if you've done the training part, the learning. So that's what I tell myself. I'd say, hey, you need to do some looking around, Andy. Find some training for folks, formal training, not just you talking. Mm-hmm. Your articulation skills are not up to the challenge with 300 people. Find a curriculum. Go buy one if you need to. And I would do that.
All right. In a very similar vein, if people are implementing a Lean-Agile PMO, at what point in time is it useful for them to actually reach out to an expert like yourself, a consultant, and say, you got to come in, you got to help us with this?
In our current implementation, the prescription that we've bought into with the intellectual property that we went after, they say the first thing to do is bring your executives in and train them. And I think that would be the best first step, is to see if that core group of hippos is interested in that. And I think that would accelerate things immensely for any company. And if you don't train your hippos, you're going to train them one conference call at a time. And by that, I mean you'll have an hour conference call to talk about some aspect of Lean that could have been in a 2-day class. So you're still going to go through that LHM model with your executives, the learning, establishing the habits, and then finally inculcating the mindset into their lives. But that L piece is so important. So I think that's the trick. And, to see if companies are ready for that. Now, again, sometimes your boss wants a pizza. Bring them a pizza. Don't worry about it. It will come around. You can do the training one conference call at a time. In fact, I just had a conference call where we discussed work in process in depth and a mathematical theory called Little's Law, and we worked our way through it. Could have been done in the classroom setting, yes. Can you get, 2 days of executive time to do training? Not often, but some companies can. So it depends. But yes, I would say reach out and find somebody who understands the intellectual property. And the other piece I would say is don't try to invent a methodology. Use one that has been proven and adapt it to your situation. So start out with something that makes sense and then adapt it. And some methodologies will say the first thing you should do is stabilize your process and then start to put Agile on top of it. So there's lots of options.
Is there anything in this process that you are still curious about, that you think, oh, you know what? I wonder if we did this, if it worked better?
Well, the entire process is constantly evolutionary, and there are groups of people right now that are very much against doing any kind of estimate. Their theory is you just break all the work down into small enough work packages that they're relatively uniform and you don't do any more estimates. And so I'm curious how you get there. I think that would be a great thing if you could get there, but how do you get there if you haven't estimated anything? And, it's a cyclical process, so I think every organization has their own maturity. But I think it's interesting. So I'm curious about organizations that are, some on this Lean Agile journey are 10 years in, 15 years in. Some are only 2 or 3. I think it would be interesting just to compare and contrast. There are some groups that probably have close to 10,000 people, doing this. My group's 1,200. There's a lot out there, and there are a lot of smart people that have worked on this for quite some time. So I'm intrigued.
You're presenting this on Monday.
I am, yes.
What is the one thing you hope to get across to the people attending your session?
I think that portfolio and program management should be an evolutionary process. And I think the biggest disservice we do to our profession and our trade and our customers is to say there are good practices, we'll roll them out, and that's it. You have to plan to replan. You have to plan to always be competitive and adapt to the market. So I hope that people will get that and say, well, here's a recipe, and this recipe doesn't seem to have any end. And that's true. It's always meant to improve.
Mm-hmm. Lean-Agile PMO, where can our listeners learn more about it? Just go to your favorite search engine, type it in, and start reading articles? Or is there anything that you would recommend?
Well, certainly search engines are great. I think that Lean-Agile PMO will bring up a lot. Scaled Agile Framework will bring up a lot. There are other methods called SAFe and DAD, and there's a proliferation. Kanban in general, with a capital K, is a methodology that tends to span several. And we've been doing Lean for a very long time. So a lot of PMI's materials cover all these topics. I think that our ACP certification is certainly best of breed. And for people to get through that and fully understand all the different flavors and nuance in Agile, there's no better foundational material. So I would encourage people to start there if you're serious about this. And then think about the PMI ACP as a supporting factor to your PMP and to your PGMP and other areas where we have learning opportunities, and really leverage that.
Mm-hmm. How can our listeners get in touch with you if they have any questions for you?
I'm on all social media, so you can find me there. I'm on projectmanagement.com, and I'm an inveterate networker, and I will always feel free to send me questions. I'll answer them. I love to meet my colleagues and find out what's going on. And if you're in one of those Lean Agile institutions that has 10,000 people working, I'd love to hear from you because I'm intrigued.
All right, call to action out there to all those really large Lean Agile organizations. Do get in touch with Andy Burns. Andy, thank you so much for your time today, and we will see you again next year.
We will, I hope. If the good Lord's willing and the river does not rise, I'll be here from Kentucky.
All right. Thank you so much.
All righty. Thank you, Cornelius.